So we are in Revelation chapter 8. We have finally got through chapter 7. I think we were at about 3 weeks in chapter 7. I'm planning only on spending 2 weeks in this chapter. We'll go through probably about the first 5 verses today, and then we will deal with the rest of the chapter next Sunday. We have been dealing with John's first vision of the seven what? Seven seals. Seven seals on, remember that book. The book that was sealed with 7 seals. And if you remember all the way back to chapter 5, who was worthy of opening those seals? The Lamb, Jesus. Jesus was worthy of opening those seals, and we have come through a progression. Does anyone remember what happened when the first seal was opened? You have to go all the way back to the beginning of chapter 6. What happened when the first seal was opened? What kind of horse? There was a white horse. Now we discussed that that is likely, although not necessarily, likely to be Christ. And so we have the white horse. And the white horse was coming to conquer, and he was followed by what color horse? According to Revelation 6, verse 5. Right, I heard somebody. Black horse. And the black horse, you remember, had a pair of scales in his hand, and he was weighing out wheat and barley, and we had said that that represented economic hardship. After that, I guess that was the third horse. There was actually a red horse before. Yeah, I skipped a horse because I'm sitting there going, there's one more horse. The red horse. What did the red horse bring?
Take peace from the earth.
Yeah, take peace from the earth. We discussed that as persecution. So we had the first seal, the white horse. Second seal, the red horse. Third seal, the black horse. Fourth seal was what horse?
Pale horse.
The pale horse, whose name was Death, and Hades followed after him. These are known as the 4 horses of the apocalypse. If you want to know where they're from Revelation chapter 6, or Revelation chapter 6. So those are the first 4 seals that were opened. The 5th seal, what? That's down in Revelation 6, verse 9. What happened when the 5th seal was opened?
Under the altar, there were people who bear testimony of God.
Yeah, there were the altar of the souls who had been slain, and they cried out for something. What did they cry out for? According to verse 10 of chapter 6.
Judgment.
Judgment and justice, yes. They wanted their blood avenged. They didn't want revenge. They wanted justice. And what was God's answer to that?
He gave them a white robe.
All right. He gave them a white robe and assured them of what?
Well, their righteousness.
Okay.
But then he asked them to be patient.
That's what I was looking for. He proclaimed that they were righteous. They were righteous, and then but they needed to be patient. Then we have, I'm trying to find it, the 6th seal. There it is, verse 12. What happened when the 6th seal was opened? Gloria, I heard you say something. I thought I heard you say something. A great earthquake. The sun became black. The moon became blood. We had discussed, of course, that this is symbolic language for what? Symbolic language for what? Like when the sun becomes black, moon turned to blood. We read of it in Acts 2. We often say it's a great day of judgment. It's not the final day of judgment. That's not what we're talking about. It's not the final day of judgment. That comes later. That would be a great notable day too. But in Acts chapter 2, same sort of language is being used. Same sort of language. But that wasn't, that was a great notable day as well. And that was the beginning of the church. This as well, day of judgment. Now we have in verse 15 of chapter 6, the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks and the mountains, calling from the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of wrath has come, and who can stand? The answer to that question, as Jeff pointed out, I think last week, who can stand according to chapter 7? Those who are sealed, the servants of God. They are the people who can withstand this judgment. How can they do that? How can they do that?
They are sealed.
They are sealed, and so what does that... I'm just looking for one word. It usually begins with F. Faith.
To keep the faith.
Faith. Remember all the way back to the 7 churches that we dealt with at the beginning. He was saying, be faithful. Keep the faith, or restore the faith that you once had. But he told the church at Smyrna, be faithful unto death. You're going to go through tribulation. Be ye faithful. Those who can stand are those who are faithful, those who are sealed. And so chapter 7 was sort of this interlude between the 6th seal and the 7th seal. And so we have, of course, the 144,000 sealed. We discussed last week that those who were of Israel, Christians who were in Israel, they would be saved. Gentiles who had obeyed Christ, they would be saved. That there was going to be really no one who, well, there was going to be no one who was sealed in Christ who would not ultimately come through this tribulation and be saved. Now, they might die physically. It's not saying that they were going to avoid death, because we did have martyrs. But the church would stand. The church would not cease to exist. It never has ceased to exist, even though it might have been small. But ultimately, ultimate victory is found in Christ, those who are sealed. Calvin.
Even though they put here 144,000 and they named 12 different tribes, which amounts to 144.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in our mind's eyes, we would think it's them and not really symbolic, because they give you 12 by 12 is 144.
Mm-hmm.
So that is sort of confusing in a way too.
Well, it's
the answer.
yeah, it's symbolic. What the symbols are being used, of course. The thousands are the completion, perfect, complete. That's what the number 1,000, the number 1,000 in the Bible. When you read a 7 and 1,000 and things like that, when we're dealing with symbolic language, that's what those mean. The number 12, of course, was God's people, and I've always tried to tell people how many tribes of Israel were there. There were 12. How many apostles were there? There were 12. And so what that number has come to represent is God's people. It's not that God chose 12 tribes because it represented God's people. It's because there were 12 tribes. Israel took that number to mean God's people. And so when they used 12 in symbolic language, they were saying, well, that's God's people, because Israel was God's people. And so that's similar what we do. We take language that we understand, and we can make symbols out of things that we make. And I can't come up with one right off the top of my head, but we do that. We make symbols. Yes, Joe.
I think in sports terms, it's common for the sports team to go, we are one.
Mhm.
You know, because they're a team, right? They think as one, they play as one. It's all for one. Well, not one.
Yeah.
We're just saying symbolically, we're one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And teams, when they don't play as one, they often lose. And so, no, that is true. That is true. We use symbols all the time to represent things. And so, the reason why 7 represents completeness. How many days did it take God to make the universe? It was complete in how many days? 7 days. He created in 6, but on the 7th day he rested. And so why has the number 7 come to mean completeness? Because it had to do with what was revealed in Genesis. A complete week is 7 days. And so these numbers have meaning because of events that have happened. So if God had made this earth in 9 days, well, the number 9 probably then would mean completeness. And if there were 9 days in a week, well, then the number 9 would mean completeness. And so these numbers have symbolic meaning, not because we're just pulling it out of the air. It's because of what they have represented in the Old Testament. These numbers, like as far as they are found in the Old Testament, we can understand what they're saying. So when we get to 144,000, we can understand, okay, 12 by 12 is 144, God's people. 1,000, completeness. So completely God's people. So in other words, there's not going to be anyone left out. You're not going to have some Christians who are going to be not sealed, and some Christians who are going to be sealed. You're going to have every Christian sealed. Whether they are Jew or whether they are Gentile, they are going to be sealed. Which means that they can withstand the tribulation time. They might die physically, but they can still withstand the tribulation time. And be saved. There is nothing that would separate that. Do we have any... this has been a sort of review to get us to chapter 8, because we're going to finish this vision in chapter 8. Is there any questions up to this point that we have, that we may have missed, or you don't understand quite? Well, if you think of any before we go on, as we go on, just bring them up. Let's read Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 to 5, and we'll start at the back with Shudong and then come up to Henry. We'll do one slide each.
When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and the 7 trumpets were given to him.
And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to outweigh the prayers of our sins on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel.
Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumbling, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake.
So again, now we've had 6 seals open. We had the sort of the break in chapter 7, in between the opening of the 6th and the 7th seal, and now we have the 7th seal open. What is mentioned at the opening of the 7th seal? What is the first thing mentioned? There are many things after that, but what is the first thing mentioned? Silence. There was silence in heaven. Wow. There's a lot of times we don't like silence. We get uncomfortable with silence. It's quiet. Not like as far as there. We've had these events all the way up through these 6 seals. This was an eventful time. And now the seventh seal is open. Silence. How long?
Half an hour.
Half an hour. Now, what we do have to realize is, again, time and numbers are symbolic. Symbolic time. This is symbolic time. Remember, there's no time in heaven. Time is for here, this earth. We tell, Genesis chapter 1 says that time was created when the sun, the moon, and the stars were made. Up until that time, we really don't have a concept of time. How do we tell time? We tell it by the sun. Now, yes, we have more precise ways, maybe, to tell time now. But it used to be, we tell it by the sun. What time is it? Well, look up at the sun. It's somewhere in the midday. And you had sundials that would tell you what time it was. What time of the year it is? Well, that's based on where the sun is in the sky. We understand. Daylight saving time ends next week. We're going to understand it gets darker quicker. And when it gets darker quicker, it's winter. And when we have more light out in the sun in the summer, well, it's because of our position in relative to the sun. Times and seasons for this earth. However, no time in heaven. No time in heaven. So when we see the number, when we see a fraction, so half an hour, or 3.5, we'll see that later. Those are incomplete, whereas 7 was complete. Half is for part of a time. So in other words, it's not going to be silence forever. That's basically what is being talked about. That's the symbol. There's silence forever for part of a time. It's not going to be forever. And so, which brings us to the second question. We have the, oh sorry, Bill.
Well, I just thought all these other visions came in with certainly not silence,
No.
but this one here now, mentioning silence and then the half hour, this is almost like they're waiting in reverence. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So there's a time here, almost like when the priests went into the temple and people stood outside and prayed.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Silence didn't mean nothing was going on. It was just quiet. That's the thing. And no, that was a good point on prayer. And when we think of silent time, it's like it also could be a time of anticipation.
Yeah.
When you think of silence, when you're sort of, because these three visions, it's almost like a 3-act play that you're seeing play out that God is giving us. This 3 acts. We're finishing Act 1. Usually at the end of an act, when you go to the play, not like a live theater, you get the end, and everyone's almost sitting on the end. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And we're waiting. So it's silence. And we're waiting for what's about to happen, because this is not the end. This is the end of this vision, 7 seals. But we're going to get into a new one in a few minutes, and it's sort of foreshadowed in what takes place. To whom were the 7 trumpets given? The 7 angels. And so again, number 7 means complete. So, yes, we might say 7 trumpets, but they are going to represent another complete vision. We had 7 seals, a complete vision. Well, we're going to have 7 trumpets. Do they sound them yet? Not yet. There's silence in heaven, remember. Not yet. Now they are going to sound them shortly, but they are not sounding them yet. But in preparation, 7 angels, 7 trumpets. Question 3 was, what do trumpets in the Bible usually represent? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Something before wars begin.
Okay, we could say, well, when we think of trumpets being sounded, there's going to be a war happening. Okay, possibly. Bill?
Call to attention.
Call to attention. When we think of, if all of a sudden, a trumpet started sounding like as far as a stream of trumpets, a band walked by, we'd rush to that window to see what's going on. They're calling us to do something's going on out there if trumpets are sounding. It's a warning also. Warning, something's coming. Something's coming. And so this vision is going to really be, if we're going to talk about trumpets, warning, call to attention. Something is going to happen. Pay attention. And so that's what this vision is going to really call us to do, because it's going to follow the same sort of pattern we saw before, with a little bit different imagery than we saw before. And so we have the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets calling to attention the people who are going to hear the trumpets, because obviously if they're going to be played, someone's going to hear the trumpets. We have question 4 then, before we get to the trumpets, which we won't get to today. But before we get to the trumpets, what was offered with the incense upon the golden altar?
Prayers of the saints.
Prayers of the saints. So we have this other angel. We have the 7 trumpets. They're being handed out to the 7 angels. We have this other angel. He had a golden censer. When we think of the tabernacle in the Old Testament, what were the instruments made of? What were the different things that were made of? The pieces of the temple. They were overlaid with what? Gold. So this is the same type of imagery. We have this golden censer. This is something that's holy. We have incense. Okay? So he comes with incense to offer it with the prayers of the saints on a golden altar before the throne. You can sort of get that picture when we have the priests offering incense on the altar. And it was often said that was a sweet aroma to the Lord. As far as they were offering incense in the Old Testament. That's the imagery that Jesus is giving John here. Is this type of energy. It's in heaven. It's not physical incense, but it is in heaven. And so we have the prayers of the saints. You can sort of, when you put incense into a bowl or something, and you light it, you get the smoke or that comes up off of the incense. And assuming that the incense that you have is a nice smell, you get a sweet aroma, a smell. And that's really the purpose of burning incense, is to get a nice smell. We often do it not with incense today. We sometimes will do it with candles. You can get the scented candles that you burn, gives the same sort of thing. But incense was to have a sweet aroma. And so the prayers of the saints are ascending with the incense up before God. Some have suggested that the incense represents the intercession of Jesus Christ. And to do that, we can go find some verses that people use can support that. Let's get Romans chapter 8. We're up to 10. Romans chapter 8, verse 34.
Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died, more than dead, who was raised, who is at the right hand of the God, who indeed is interceding for us.
To intercede, what does that mean?
It's like a lawyer. It's a mediator.
Yeah. Well, mediator would be something, that would be the person. What does to intercede mean? Yeah, okay. To speak for. To intercede on someone's behalf is to speak for someone on their behalf. A mediator is the actual person. Mediate and intercede go hand in hand. Mediate is to sort of bring two sides together to come to an agreement. To intercede is to actually speak for someone. It is true. The scriptures teach that Christ intercedes for us. Can't deny it. Romans 8:34 says so. He is indeed interceding for us. In Hebrews chapter 7, verse 25, let's get Gloria to get that.
Consequently, he is able to save the uttermost, those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them.
Okay, again, talking about Christ in this chapter. And you get a lot of the figures that we're talking about in Revelation, found in Hebrews as well, when you talk about physical sacrifices, spiritual sacrifices. And Christ is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession. So we do have this idea that Christ intercedes for us. Whether or not the incense represents that, I do not know. And that is the speculation part. That is what people would speculate on. That Christ intercedes for us, that's not speculative. He does. But whether that's represented in the incense, I can't say. The incense seems to imply that God views the prayers of the saints as pleasant. Compare that to what we read of in the Bible, that He does view the prayers of the saints as pleasant. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2, Jeff.
And walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God.
So Christ here, Christ's sacrifice, what's it described as? Fragrant offering and sacrifice. A fragrant offering. So, sweet smelling. Yes, a sweet smelling sacrifice. That means approval, right? That's what we're talking about. We would think, okay, that's approval. Sweet smelling sacrifice. It wasn't an odious or I'm trying to find the word, terrible, we'll just say terrible smelling sacrifice. If it was, who here, and I'll raise my hand as well, have burnt something while cooking? I have. What's usually the smell when you burn something?
It's not pleasant.
Not pleasant at all. I did that this week. I was following a recipe, and I didn't have a thermometer to test the oil that I was supposed to be cooking in. They said bring it up to a certain temperature. Well, I had heated it for about 10 minutes. I thought, well, that's probably enough. If anything, it's too cold. And I put it in, and immediately, what I was cooking turned black. I'm like, oh, that's not good. And it really smelled terrible. That's not how God viewed Jesus' sacrifice. Jesus' sacrifice, which is able to save us from sin, is a sweet-smelling aroma because it actually did the job. God had commanded this sacrifice. He had demanded this sacrifice. Jesus obeyed. That is a sweet-smelling aroma. Let me see. Yes, I don't know why it's up there twice. But in Philippians chapter 4, verse 18, we'll come across the bill.
I have received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God.
This is not talking about Jesus' sacrifice in this chapter. It's talking about what? I know we're jumping in, but what's it talking about? A gift. From the Philippians to, who is the I in this chapter? Paul. So obviously the Philippians had supported Paul in his preaching. And that is described here as a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. So anything that is acceptable and pleasing to God is described in Scripture as something that is a fragrant offering. And so we can have this incense in Revelation chapter 8 sort of coming along. You can sort of think, well, that would be a fragrant offering. We know the prayer is offered with the incense. Whether the incense represents anything more than just incense, I'll leave that up to you. But prayer is effective. That we do need to come away with. Prayer is effective. Kala, Revelation chapter 5, verse 8.
And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 angels fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints.
We've seen this figure in Revelation before. The 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, and each had a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. We've seen that before. Prayer is effective and powerful. Gord, we'll go to Gord and then back to Annette. We'll do one slide each. Revelation 6, 9 to 11.
When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?
Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been.
Okay, and again, we had talked about this earlier in today's class. Was God listening to these people?
Yes.
Did God hear them? Yes, He did. He heard them. Their voices were powerful enough for God to hear. Sometimes we think prayer, I don't know if prayer is so effective. Prayer is effective. It's powerful. God hears. Gord.
Well, if somebody says that you're questioning their prayer being effective, we're supposed to pray in faith. So they're not praying in faith.
Yeah, that's yes.
So that would be an ineffective prayer.
Yes, that's yes. If we don't pray in faith, or if we have a lack of faith, then we shouldn't wonder why our prayer is ineffective. James would say, if you don't ask in faith, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much, but you have because you do not ask, and then you have because you have not asked according to the will of God. And so, prayer to be effective must be in faith. There's the noise we were trying to avoid, but it's done in faith for it to be effective. These were faithful. What's next? We'll go back to James. Psalms 141, verses 1 and 2.
O Lord, I call upon you. Hasten to me. Give ear to my voice when I call to you. Let my prayer be counted as incense before you, and the lifting up of my hands as evening sacrifice.
The psalmist gives us this same sort of symbol as to prayer. Was the psalmist here, is he praying in faith? Yes, he is. He is asking, Lord, I call upon you, hasten to me, come quickly to me, give ear to my voice, and let my prayer be counted as incense before you. And so, we have this idea of the prayers going up before God as this incense, and God smelling this incense and answering the prayers. The question, which we won't get into because I'd rather not try to rush the second bell, the question that we will get into, Lord willing, at the beginning of next week's class then, is what happened when the angel cast fire upon the earth? And that will lead us into the next vision. So it's sort of the end of this vision, and then we'll get into the vision of the 7 trumpets. And we'll deal with that, the Lord willing, next week.